We've seen it work. We know that it can work. So how do we actually go through and make America great again? Because we started the mandate because we know that the bureaucracy, they don't care who wins elections. They're just going through and expanding either way, right? So this is what we're trying to fight against. So Matthew, what the mandate at its core is trying to get back to just the founding of the country and making sure that we get back to these founding principles that actually did work at one point in time.
Yeah, so these are, I mean, this is all the marbles. These are the biggest questions you can ask as an American, and the problem is severe. And the problem is, at the level of the structure of government, or the fancy word people use, regime level. It's the actual like form of government, all the different parts and pieces, that is out of whack. And that means that we're not living under the constitutional republic that we had in the early American Republic, and this thing is metastasized in a way that really is outrageous. So, you have the actual Constitution, the words, and you have the Constitution of America as things actually work, and it's way out of whack. So what do you need to do that? Well, first off, you need to realize the scope of the problem. The scope of the problem is you have to bend back the actual structure of government into something other than it is right now. And if you do that, everyone's going to call you a tyrant, right? Because everyone who likes the current system will say, oh, this is unconstitutional to change, the constitutional practices back to something like the original Constitution. So how do you do that? What do you do? Well, you see the effort in this administration, Mike. I mean, DOGE was an effort to rein in, control over that entire administrative state apparatus. How long did that last? Right? There's still elements of it out there. This is enormously important, like how that flow of money happens. Can you actually self-govern and have elected political officials and political appointees take control of that thing, or does it just run itself? And that is the battle that, the mandate is focused on, because it's really the only game in town, and you see it going on out there in myriad ways, 1,000 different ways. But as Chris will tell you, there's so many efforts in this administration to counter it. That's what's heartening. And it's sort of finally someone on the right, administration on the right, even more than Trump last time, coming in, and there's a lot of people out there in the administration who recognize the scope of the problem and are actively fighting against it. And I mean, just came back from the Publius Fellowship. We had an alumni panel with very young alumni, and a number of them were in the administration, talking to the new fellows coming in. And a number of them were already in the administration. And these are people who are in their 20s. They understand everything we're talking about here. And if you're watching at home, you should know. I mean, there is this new generation of conservative leadership that is absolutely loaded for bear and understands the problem and is ready to fight. But nonetheless, as Chris Bedford has to document every day, it's a messy business there.
Yeah, and Claremont is going through and doing the Lord's work, getting that civics education back rooted in American exceptionalism. And I think I want to bring it back even just to what Donald Trump is doing with America 250, Chris. I think this is going to go through and create a new wave where it is cool to talk about all of these things that we're talking about here on this show. So how would you go about fixing the rot in this country?
Well, I love what they did as soon as they came in. One of the first warning signs about there's actually a lot of warning signs, but it's been obvious that the left uses things like, the Democrats use things like democracy just to describe them getting their way. And it's undemocratic if it doesn't go their way. And it seemed like an unstoppable machine. There was so much money behind it. There was so many administrative bureaucracies behind it. There were so many giant billion-dollar nonprofits behind it. I could never quite understand, where did all this money come from? Are these all just Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates' divorcees just giving out all these billions of dollars they feel guilty about? Who's funding this? And it turned out it was us. Having been in D.C. for over 20 years now, I did not realize just how deep the rot at USAID went, just how much the American taxpayer was putting into this left-wing governance. And that's one of the things that the mandate has been so phenomenal at actually seeking out and getting rid of and having those fights. And there's screams and there's yells, but even those Democrats who went forward and said, I cannot believe you're impacting foreign aid, I'm going to run on this for the next 2 years, the pollsters had to tell them, stop. The American people don't care. They don't care at all. In fact, they like this. This is a popular thing. You need to drop it. And they actually have. They've kind of walked away from those sorts of battles. But there is significantly more to fight. The bureaucracy is completely run full of folks who think that their job is to preserve democracy by being completely unanswerable, by making these rulings. Unfortunately, with the REINS Act, didn't actually make it in or didn't make it past the parliamentarian. It might have in a newer form. I have to catch up in a more succinct form. But the idea that the Senate ought to be overseeing and approving administrative regulations that cost hundreds of millions of dollars to the U.S. economy that are just made with the stroke of a pen in some office by someone you've never seen in the name of democracy. That's a real threat. And rooting that out and exposing it has been so essential because Republicans, the people who are likely to be selected as the next presidential nominee, Marco Rubio or J.D. Vance or someone, recognize this. They recognize that this is a serious issue. They also recognize something that so much of the libertarians of D.C., which are distinct from the libertarians of the country. You think of people in the countryside. You think about that guys in Nevada, your uncle who's got a bunch of guns and wants to be left alone. That's not what D.C. libertarians are like. They're so often paid corporate shills for major money interests, including big tech and some of the technology firms. They want unfettered global trade that undermines the American economy because they say, don't worry, things will get better after 30 years of them getting worse and worse and worse. They say, don't worry, it'll turn around if we just make our billionaire masters who buy tables at the Cato Gala richer and richer. And those people being exposed for what they were in the American governance, from DeSantis down versus Disney to Donald Trump versus some of these companies, has been phenomenal to say, listen, the American people rebelled against the concentration of power. If we'd been ruled by the East India Company as opposed to the British Crown, we still would have had an issue. We don't care that it's a semi-private company. The concentration of unanswerable power being wielded against the people is a major problem. And we saw it got really dangerous for a while after President Trump was kicked off of Twitter, after competitors to Twitter were kicked off of their hosting platforms and weren't even allowed to be on the internet, that the major corporations were swinging that hard against American liberties and freedoms and the American people and the American dream. The whole idea that if you don't like something, you can build it yourself. And that, for now, appears to be in full retreat, and it's a welcome sign.
Yeah, we're going to keep pushing for that here on the mandate. But Matthew, when I look at it, right, we can talk about nostalgia. We can say, oh, these things are great. But we know that we have to have solutions. And that's what we're trying to do here on the show every day, is just figure out how to go best about fulfilling Trump's mandate and making sure that we use this time, this very precious time that we have, wisely, because there's not a lot of it right now.
Yeah, you can really look at what we all were talking about in two phases, really simply. As first, you got to roll back what Chris was just talking about. You got to get rid of the weaponized government, right? So first, it's like get rid of the negative. And by the way, part of that has to be absolutely 100% no backseas. Deportations at a massive scale. You let 20 million people in here, we can't do a damn thing. And none of what we're talking about makes any sense or matters unless we actually deport the tens of millions of random people that were dumped into this country. That is insanity. So that's number one, right? So there's a lot of these things that you need to right wrongs, and you need to make sure that the government stops attacking the idea of America and attacking Americans. And so that's a lot of the work you see now, and that's really important. But then beyond that, that's number one. You just got to beat back the bad guys and stop the insanity. But then after that, you do have to structurally reform or refound the federal government. That's the larger task, and I think ultimately more and more Americans are going to see that as essential moving forward. And let me be honest, that's probably going to take that's going to take a long time. We need two Vance terms. We need after this to go after it. But so everything in the administration right now revolves around time. The more time that people that's what they have. They have power, right? But the scarce commodity is time, and the clock is ticking. And all the smart people, the good people, they know that. And that's why every time they have to get in an argument with someone else on their own side or whatever else, we're wasting time. And I think our audience and the voters know that, and that's the challenge right now for the Trump administration.
And that's one of the left wing's best tactics. Mm-hmm. Whether you're trying to do anything, they tie you up in lawsuits. Federal injunctions, thank God, just took a major hit in the Supreme Court last week. But that was an important step. But these groups that were funded by the taxpayer were for billions of dollars would come out and they would sue the Republican administration to get them to stop them from doing something. They would tie them up for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, time's up. Now the Democrats come in, they put through a bunch of different new orders that are very, very, very difficult to actually undo. It's much easier to do things like that, to destroy things, than it is to actually create things. And they've taken advantage of that. And there's a weapon that the administration has that Republicans and conservatives didn't realize they had. And you see it in the lawsuits against Harvard, the lawsuits against other Ivy League colleges, when you see it when going after the endowment funds. For years, conservatives are going around trying to protect things and conserve things, which is something that you simply cannot do when you have to share power with someone who wants to destroy them and sometimes has power for 4, 8, 12 years and spends all that time wrecking things. But now they're looking around and saying, what exactly am I trying to conserve here? So many of the institutions in the commanding heights of the American system, from the corporations to the schools, are being used using the benefits that we gave them as the American people, the carve-outs we gave them to allow them to flourish, to punish us and to undermine the American system and the American way of life and to go after the little guy. So now they're looking around and they're considering themselves almost revolutionary in the way they look at it. It reminds me of a early 1960s article M. Stanton Evans wrote, a great writer, young newspaper guy who wrote the Sharon Statement, asking, can conservatives be revolutionary? And you have to be, was his conclusion. It took a while for people to realize this and to catch up with it. But you have to look around at all these commanding heights and say, we're not in the defensive battle. We are on an offensive battle at this point. You need to go back and take those spots. You need to hold them accountable. You can't just let them sit in the sidelines for 4 years. And then when you leave power, they come back and do whatever they were doing before. You have to actually take it to them.